Hello, my name is Michael, and I'm doing my book report about The Brothers by Stephen Kinzer. To start off, I want to introduce the two brothers, John Foster Doss and Allen Doss. John Foster Doss was the older of the two, and he ends up becoming the Secretary of State under President Eisenhower during the 1950s, while Allen Doss, the younger of the two brothers, becomes the director of the CIA during the same time period. To really understand who they are as a person and their characters, we have to look at their upbringing. They grew up in a very religious, strict Calvinist, elite Protestant family. When I say elite, I mean elite. They were well connected. Growing up, they would have President Wilson come and have dinner with them, and other famous people in the political world come and eat with them. Their grandfather was actually John W. Foster, who was a former Secretary of State under President Benjamin Harrison, and their what was it? Their mom's brother-in-law was Lansing, who they called Uncle Bart, and he was a Secretary of State later on too. So they were really well connected. Their family was very. They were definitely elites. Like they were really well connected in the political world and all types of things like that. And growing up, they both become lawyers at Sullivan and Cromwell, and this lawyer firm was very well known for working towards American businesses. So they would do anything to do with American businesses out of the United States of America. So let's say there's a business in Cuba that's failing. Their job would to be to help that business like succeed in no matter what in that different country. There's actually a very good story of this. Um, while John Foster Dawes was a young associate at the law firm, there was a rebellion in Cuba, and at the time, John Foster Dawes was put on the case by the law firm to protect American investments. So he went to his uncle Bert and actually sent two warships to Cuba and some troops on the land, and that's what ended up happening. Like he had such a pull over the United States military just by his family. Like their family was so elite. That's just who they were. Uncle Bert was able to send the two warships, and what happened was they put the rebellion down, and the American investments were saved. And also we need to look back and see where their strong sense of justice came from. Growing up, their grandfather, who was this previous Secretary of State, and their uncle Bert would take them on long fishing trips. It was an opportunity for them to like instill them their wisdoms and their values and their thoughts about the United States and all these political thoughts and all these important stuff to them, right? It really shaped who they were growing up. So with this realistic or not realistic, I'm sorry, with this religion, religious background and this strong senses of like justice and what the United States should be, it really formed what they did in their political future as the Secretary of State and the director of the CIA, and how it led to a lot of things, which I'll get into in a little bit. But also, I'd like to focus on their personalities. While the brothers had the same beliefs, they had completely opposite personalities. John Foster Doss was socially awkward, aloof, and cold, while his younger brother, Alan Doss, was the opposite, complete opposite. He loved being in larger groups of people. He was very much an extrovert, and he would love sharing stories about everything he's done. He was actually, fun fact, he was actually a teacher in India for a bit, teaching English. He was all over the world doing so many great things, or so many interesting things, I should say. He was also like a very much a ladies' man. Like he had so many mistresses. Like it was well known that he was married, but like he was sleeping around, and like people were like, "Oh, that's just good old Alan Doss, you feel?" But this is very important because at this time, the CIA, when Alan Doss was elected the director of the CIA, at this time the CIA was very. It was a big concern in DC. Like a lot of people viewed it as it wouldn't be smart to intrude onto other people's like, countries and their political matters and what's going on in other people's countries and like try doing all the other stuff out of the United States. Like it just didn't seem like we should do this, especially with the maybe like a nuclear war on the field, like on the fence that might happen sooner or later. Like it could really just like push it into a negative direction that people didn't like, right? But since he was such a people pleaser, right? Just people knowing that he ran the CIA gave him comfort. They were less concerned about the CIA because of his character. All right. Both brothers were sworn into office immediately after President Eisenhower took office in 1953. Um, and after this happened, the brothers really wanted to focus on stuff outside the United States, and they went after what they called the six monsters, which were six figures in the world who they thought were evil. And this comes back to their upbringing, where they believe that there is good and evil in this world, and the United States is essentially good. Like democracy is essentially good, right? Where if you're not on our side, or if you're not on the side of consumerism, if you're not on the side of the United States on democracy, if you're anything other than what the United States supports, they viewed you as evil. They didn't think like they didn't think you were right, essentially. Like they thought we had to come into the country and fix it. We had to put up our own regime and make sure that they are supporting the United States, supporting the United States businesses, supporting the United States, everything, right? It wasn't just a war about communism. It was just the United States. Like we need the United States to be numero uno. You feel me? And the six monsters were the Prime Minister of Iran, who was Muhammad Mossadegh. Also, the President of Guatemala. I'm sorry if I'm butchering these names. Jacob Arbenz. And then also the Prime Minister of Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh. Also, we had um, the President of Indonesia, Sarukun. Oh, I feel like I'm butchering him. Also, the President, no, the Prime Minister of the Congos, Patrick or Patrice Lemon, and and the Prime Minister of Cuba, Fidel Castro. Those were who they considered the six monsters or six people that are really in the way of the United States while they were in power. And I'm gonna go through each one of them and figure out or explain why they were considered monsters in the eyes of the Dos brothers. First, I'm gonna start off with the president of Iran, or the prime minister of Iran, Mohammed Mossadegh. Mohammed Mossadegh was considered a monster in their eyes because he challenged the Western's control of Iran's oil. As prime minister in 1951, Mossadegh nationalized the Arilo Iranian Oil Company, asserting Iran's right to its own resource. But that would intrude on the United States' oil rights and like oil, just like it's like resources to oil, and they saw it as a threat because of that. So in 1953, the CIA engineered Operation Adax, overthrowing Mussolini and installing the Sahad, SHAH. The result, the result was a short-term United States and British access to Iranian oil, but long-term resentment and political repression that ultimately contributed to the 1979 Iranian revolution, reshaping global politics. Right, that was the first one. Second one was Jacob Arbizan of Guatemala. The brothers referred to him as a monster because of his diplomatic land reform threatening the United Fruit Company. So in 1952, Arzaban passed Decree 900, redistributing unused plantations land to poor Guatemalan farmers. Though not a communist, he was a moderate nationalist, and the Dos brothers found that they thought that he was like aligning with Soviets' influence, and they thought they were like following the Soviets' thoughts of communism. So they did Operation BP Success, and basically ran a covert propaganda to force Azubek from power, and they tried installing another person, but this ended up leading into a 36-year civil war, marking the deaths of millions. And this one was a big one. The Ho Chi Minh, so the prime minister of Ho Chi Minh, they labeled him as a monster because he viewed communists as like the right way. Like he thought communists was better than becoming nationalist and independent, right? So they ended up trying to support the people that were in power before the French communist rule, and try like labeling Ho Chi Minh as someone bad and not like you know what I mean, not someone that's fit to rule Vietnam. And because of this, this ended up leading to basically a failed mission and the United States having to join the Vietnam War. And this was one of the United States' loss. Like we were dragged into the Vietnam War, and a lot of people do not consider this war as a win at all. The fourth would be the president of Indonesia, Sukarno, and he became a monster in their eyes because he insisted on leading Indonesia as a non-aligned nation. He refused to join the American Cold War and as a part of the United States side, and they wanted to stay independent. So John Foster Dawes viewed this idea of neutrality as immoral, and he thought that this just wasn't what it should be. It's like you gotta take a good side of good or bad. Like you're on the good side or the bad side, and not picking a side. It's just you being on the bad side because you're not aligned with the good side, right? So he ended up leading the CIA under Alice Dawes to attempt to overthrow him by supporting regional rebellions and even covert bombing missions. The operation failed, but it weakened Sukarno domestically. The result was a long-term destabilization that paved the way for the 1965 anti-communist takeover by Suharto, followed by mass killings of hundreds of thousands of Indonesians. And then their fifth monster was Patrice from the Congos. Patrice was casted as a monster because he sought to free the Congo from Belgian regime or Belgian control and oppress the regime exploitations of Congolese material wealth. In 1960, he became the first prime minister of the independent Congos. He called for genuine sovereignty, resistance to mining monopolies, and willingness to accept Soviet aid only after Western nations refused to help trigger John Foster Dawes' belief that Labamnes was a Soviet pawn. In the same year, the CIA labeled him a major threat and pursued plans to remove or assassinate him. Although the specific CIA plan failed, he was captured by rival factions and killed in January 1961, with indirect CIA and Belgian involvement. This resulted in a political chaos that eventually enabled Mambu's brutal decade-long dictatorship, leaving Congos unstable long after him. Sixth, Fidel Castro from Cuba. Fidel Castro became a monster to the Dallas Brothers because his revolutionary threats threatened the United States political influence and corporation interests in Cuba. Uh, this ended up leading them to getting into the CIA basically planned an invasion to remove Castro, which evolved into the Bay of Pigs operation executed in 1961. The mission failed, invasion pushing Castro into a foreign alliance with the USSR, resulting in the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, and permanently altering the United States-Cuban relationship. And I just want to say this at the very end, but basically, them going after these so-called monsters with the thoughts of doing it for peace and justice, and these thoughts of like, okay, we gotta do this for the betterment of the United States, is what led to many. It led to the downfall of many nations. Like many nations struggled, many people died because of this. And while the brothers were doing it out of the best interest of the United States, it didn't seem like they did it for in a humanitarian wise, like human wise all over. It didn't seem like they did the right thing because this caused deaths of hundreds of thousands easily. And maybe us not intervening in other countries' affairs and their political worlds, it might have led to better relationships between different countries. I mean, the USSR fell anyways, but the Dawes brothers didn't know that. They didn't know that was going to happen. But at the same time, if we didn't intervene, maybe things would have been better. But we never know. But it's very interesting. I definitely enjoyed the book. I relate to it very much because brothers. I have brothers myself, and I thought it was really cool that two brothers hold such power within the government. Even one being in control of the CIA, and the other one being the Secretary of State. That just seemed very cool to me. Very awesome. I really enjoyed the book, and thank you for your time.